Hey everybody, welcome to the Beyond Battlecreek podcast. My name is Kurt Von Eschen, and my co-host today is Rachel Crawford, and we're so excited to have you here. Rachel, how are you today?
Hey Kurt, I am so excited to be here. Thank you for inviting me on this podcast. I'm good. It is so good to be out of the house, honestly, to drive my car, to be around people. I'm just so excited that we're working ourselves through these phases.
Yeah, so we're in phase 2. So what has that meant for you and your family and stuff like that?
Well, it's meant we've started a venture outside the house. We've started going out to eat. It's
so
been
good.
Awesome to, have those hot chips and salsa just straight out of the oven.
It's not the same when you bring it home.
No, it's not the same.
No.
It's not the same.
That's awesome. Last night, for the first time, my community group got together, and it was so good just to be together. We didn't necessarily hit a ton of content, but just checking in with one another and finding out how we could pray for one another, and then how we could encourage one another. It was so good to be back together.
Yeah, I'm excited. I'm looking forward to it. Our group's going to meet in person next week for the first time. We've still been Zooming it. But yeah, so excited to see my people.
So, Rachel, many people who may be watching today or listening today, they don't know who you and I probably are. And so tell us a little bit about what you do here at the church and just about your story and how God brought you to Battlecreek.
Okay, yeah, happy to. So my title is Director of Administration, which could mean lots of different things depending upon what organization you're in. But essentially, I oversee a few of our areas. I oversee our Office of the Pastor area, which really just means anything that Alex touches. I help him try to figure out what it is that he would like to accomplish. Pastoral care is in there as well. I also oversee missions. So I'm so excited about that, working with Delmy Guajardo and figuring out how we can be the church locally and globally. And then I also oversee HR and legal. My background is in legal. I was an employment lawyer for about 11 years before I came on staff. And so I oversee those areas.
So as an employment lawyer, how do you go from that into church work? And tell us about that transition and how so God brought you here first to Battlecreek Church. So you didn't come for the job, but you came here, God started working in your heart, and you felt called into ministry. Tell us how that happened.
Yeah, it's a crazy journey, as you would imagine. So we first came to Battlecreek Church as church members in 2005. So we've been here 15 years. My husband and I, we have 3 kids. So we came in 2005, and really what brought us here was Pastor Alex. He was my youth pastor back when I was growing up in the youth group. And so we had moved back to Broken Arrow from college and decided that we would check it out because he was the pastor, and we've never left, never looked back, and have loved this church for 15 years. And then it was about 2.5 years ago that I was working in my law firm as an employment lawyer and just really felt like the Lord was calling me away from the firm, but I wasn't sure what he was calling me to. And it was a weird experience in my life because it's really the first time I felt called away without knowing what I was going toward. And so for about 8 or 9 months, I really just prayed and asked the Lord to show me where he would have me go. My undergrad degree is in social work, so I just naturally started there, just logically thought, well, maybe...
I didn't know that.
Yeah, maybe I'm going to head back there. And so just have a passion for foster care and adoption. And of course, that's one of the things I love about this church as well, because that's also a heartbeat. And so I reached out to Pastor Alex really to see if he could connect me with somebody in that world, thinking, maybe there is a connection and that would lead me to where I was supposed to go. And I guess it sort of did in a way. I ended up here, which is hilarious because I never in a million years thought I'd work at a church. But in conversations with Pastor Alex, it just felt like the Lord was just saying, hey, you need to come here. And I honestly didn't really understand what I was actually coming to at the beginning. We had multiple conversations, and every time I would walk away and just think, I'm not really sure what it is they're asking me to do. And yet I felt just this huge urging that I was supposed to be here. And so when I first came, I started out just working with Pastor Alex in his office. And over time, that's grown into various other things. And so now I just have the privilege of being on staff and just trying to help where I can. I would say the thing that I love the most is people. I love people, and I just want to see people grow and develop and help disciple them. And that's really my goal, honestly, no matter what area of ministry I'm working in. It's just to love people and help them grow.
That's awesome. I know that adoption is a part of your guys' story, and I know it's played a significant role in your life and being a part of a church where we value adoption and helping and loving all people. And so tell me a little bit about your journey with that. I think that's really a unique part of your story.
Yeah. So it definitely ties into Battlecreek Church. We were, my husband and I were here Easter Sunday, and I can't remember what year it was, where Pastor Alex went rogue. like he does sometimes. It's one of the things we love about him. And just decided instead of preaching the traditional Easter message, the resurrection, he was going to preach about adoption, which came out of a conversation he'd had with a church member that had asked the question, hey, why have I never heard you preach on adoption and foster care and orphan care? It's in the Bible so much. And it really got him thinking. And that's another thing I love about Pastor Alex is that he loves to be challenged. And with that question, he started digging in himself and thinking, why haven't I heard many messages about that? And so anyway, that led to a sermon series over Easter, challenging people to get involved in adoption and foster care and to be the church to the orphans and to the fatherless. And so my husband and I at the time were trying to start a family and we're not having success in that regard. And so we just were really praying, like, Lord, what would you have us do? We had struggled with infertility and had been through lots of different treatments, drugs and shots and, you name it, all these different procedures. And none of that was working. And so there was a community group at the time that was created called Adopted. And it was in homes, just like our normal community groups are. And they brought in various speakers every week that had participated in various parts. So that you had a speaker one week that had adopted internationally. And then the next week it would be a family that had adopted domestically, and then a foster family. And so it just gave you a taste of what it's like really kind of an unfiltered, ask whatever you want. We're going to be honest about what this really means. And so out of that, we decided that the Lord was calling us to adopt. So at first we started out down the international path because we had a little bit more familiarity, some friends that had done that. We knew nothing about domestic adoption. So there was kind of a natural fear there. And as we just walked step by step with the Lord, he led us to domestic adoption. And we ended up adopting both of our boys domestically here. They were born in Oklahoma City. And we have open adoptions. And so we get to not only love them, but their birth families, which has just been just an amazing experience, just how the Lord can just change your perspective of what family looks like, and maybe what you think of a birth parent look like because of what you've seen on TV really shatters all of that. And I just love being able to how making the decision to communicate and be around maybe people that you wouldn't normally otherwise, how that just broadens your view. Yeah. And anyway, it's just been so great. I'm just thankful for a church that promotes and encourages and wants to support adoptive and foster families. Yeah. And so we've just found it to be amazing in our life.
That's awesome. I love watching how your boys are every bit a part of your family as your daughter is, and the fact of how you celebrate them and love them. And it's amazing to see that it doesn't necessarily matter who your birth parents are, but that you can actually make a family that is every bit a family. It has love and celebration and encouragement and coaching and all the things that bring us those memories and helps raise these kids up in a godly way. And I love the fact that you're raising these two boys and your daughter in a way that would honor God. And that's awesome.
Thank you. I guess I should say, you mentioned my daughter. So after we had adopted our boys, we really just felt like, okay, adoption was going to be the path for our family. And we were so excited about that. And, as the Lord would have it, one thing I learned, I think the main thing I learned through our adoption stories and then beyond with our daughter is that we're not in control and the Lord is in control. And we can try and strive and do all of those things. But at the end of the day, the Lord is going to determine our steps and his plan is going to be so much better than ours. And I'll never forget showing up at the doctor's office after, the boys were 2 and 4, just, for a regular appointment, and the doctor coming in and telling me I was pregnant and just thinking, okay. I mean, it rocked my world. I wasn't sure what to feel. I didn't know if I was supposed to feel excited or if I was supposed to feel sad. Of course, the thing that's running through my mind initially is just, how is this going to affect my boys? Yeah. Not wanting them to feel any differently because, they didn't grow inside my tummy the way that she would. And just all of those feelings and emotions came crashing down. But when I was able to sort through it all, the thing that really stood out to me was just the Lord's goodness. He knew that I had a desire in my heart deep down to be able to experience pregnancy and those things. And it was just his graciousness to allow me to experience that, along with just the joys of adoption as well.
Yeah. Going back to part of your story, kind of taking a pivot from the adoption side, I love what Pastor read out of Philippians 3 this weekend. And he talked about what things I once counted as gain, I now count as lost, so that I can know Christ. And as I think about your story, the things that you used to count as gain, with, practicing in a law firm, being a partner and all those things, how when you pivoted in your life, God has rewarded you in so many other ways as you've really just sought to be faithful to his heart. And I just want to commend you in the way that you have shown faith and the way that you've pursued Christ in that. Because what I would say is, for those of you who don't know, our staff culture here has been, it's awesome. And a lot of that is due to Rachel and her work with our HR team. And so I think, can you tell me a little bit about what are some of the things that you, through leading HR and through some of those different things, have done to make our culture a fantastic place to work?
Well, I think it goes back again to loving people, honestly. And we have some great leadership here, with Mike Babb. One of the things that he always says is, we're going to show love in the workplace. That's if you're around him for longer than 5 minutes, you're going to hear that come out of his mouth. And I totally agree. It's about loving one another in humility. And so, we've been just trying to be creative in HR about how do we love one another? How do we have fun? It's so important. Sometimes ministry can be hard. I think that's particularly true right now in the time that we're in. I feel like I don't go a day without receiving a call or a text about a member of our congregation that's struggling and dealing with hardship. And so how do we both minister and be able to pour out what God's pouring in, and at the same time be able to live joyful lives and be able to laugh and celebrate in the midst of the hardship. And so one of the things HR has tried to do is we've tried to create some moments of fun, we've had benefit meetings where we've had everybody dress up in costume and just to lighten it, to be able to laugh together and have fun together. We've really taken a look at our benefits program to feel like, hey, how can we do more with less? How can we provide more for our employees from a benefits perspective and still be fiscally responsible? So just trying to take on some of those challenges. One of the things we're working on right now is coming up with a development program to be able to grow those who are already on our staff. And so just trying to figure out, how do we love people?
Sure. That's awesome. I think a couple of things that I would say that are some key aspects of our workplace culture here would be, we want to have fun. And so we're encouraging that. And I know most people go, well, you're there to work, but if you don't enjoy where you work, you're not going to work there very long.
That's right.
And I would say also, we celebrate hard work. One of the other things is sometimes in ministry, we can be so focused on the next event or the next big hill that we have to climb. Maybe it's a camp or a conference or something like that, that we sometimes don't stop and celebrate well. And so I think one of the things that you guys have been doing well and embedding in our culture is an atmosphere of celebration and actually celebrating wins, and like this weekend, we had several people receive Christ, and that's an awesome thing. And we don't want to just pass on and just go, okay, we're on to the next thing. We actually want to stop and celebrate the good work that God is doing in people's lives and how he's utilizing each one of us and our skill sets and our larger church to actually help facilitate, reaching people for Christ and fulfilling the Great Commission. I think one of the other things that we celebrate here is flexibility. Alex is a great leader who is spirit-led, and sometimes it means course correcting. And I love that sometimes that we can pivot on a dime, and our team is highly flexible. I think one of the other things that we celebrate here is creativity. We don't want to just copycat what every other church is doing. We want to be fresh and innovative and those type of things. And then also just innovation, the fact that we're celebrating not just when people win with an innovation, but also sometimes when we fail, because it at least means that we tried. And so failing smart, failing quick, and those type of things. So I think, and then also when we do have a micro innovation, and we recognize that something has some legs to stand on, then recognizing, we can actually make this a macro innovation within our culture. And so those are a few things that I thought were, that I love about our culture and some of the things I see developing within our culture. So Rachel, we have 6 internal core values that we have for staff here. And for those of you who aren't on staff, you may have never heard these, but I'd love to dive a little deeper into these to flesh them out a little bit. Because I think, so whether you're a staff member currently, or whether you're a congregation member, or whether you're someone who's maybe potentially looking at joining our staff, I think it'd be good for you to hear these things. And these are our 6 internal core values that we want for every single staff member. So Rachel, I'd love just to kind of unpack these together. And so the first one is, I'll take care of myself spiritually, emotionally, and physically. What does that look like for our organization, for an employee?
Well, I think first and foremost, it looks like, from a spiritual aspect, is just making sure that we are spending time with the Lord. Like I said before, just with any job, your work requires something from you. And so you've got to be able to continuously to fill yourself. And so I think sometimes that looks like our own self-development, finding areas where we need to grow, and that constant check-in. I think it can mean prayer. One of the things I'm so excited about that has been a really positive thing during this time of quarantine is we have had staff prayer every morning where we all who can jump on from 8:30 to 9. And we share stories, we share wins, we share things prayers God has answered, prayers that we have. We encourage one another with scripture. And it's just been a sweet time. We run so fast, and with having 6 campuses, there can be weeks that go by that we don't see everybody.
Yeah.
And so it's been such a great time to just come together as one church and pray for one another, and to be able to text one another throughout the week. I think that's been hugely helpful to our spiritual health.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things for people who are part of our organization is to be a self-learner. So a lot of times people stop reading books after they go through college, or unless they have to become a subject matter expert on something. But I think it's important for all of us to continually take our own growth and responsibility for that, not just spiritually, but also skill set wise, and growing in emotional and relational intelligence and those things. I think for me, this core value really speaks to taking care of myself spiritually. Yes, that's fostered with a relationship with Christ. And if I don't, everything flows out of that. So if I don't take care of that, everything else is going to wither. And then emotional, I think sometimes we forget that we have souls and that our souls need to be taken care of. And sometimes we don't realize that we have a soul until all of a sudden our world starts crumbling in around us, and we have uncontrollable depression or anxiety or things that we're wrestling through. And a lot of times that's where hurts, habits, and hangups come from, is when we haven't taken care of the emotional side or the soul side of who we are. And then also just physically, that for us to not to be any one shape, but for us to take care of ourselves physically so that we can do for a long distance the things that God's put in our hearts to do. And so we can fulfill the mission of the church by reaching all people of all ages, all across the world, and I think that we can't do that if we don't take care of ourselves in those 3 ways. The next core value is I will communicate well, believe the best, honor each other, and be authentic. What does that mean to you?
Well, I think this is maybe the one that I feel like as an organization we've really grown in, and obviously there's always still growth to be had. But to me, this comes back to love in the workplace. I think being able to put yourself in the shoes of somebody else. So like we run really fast, like you said, we pivot often. We're always innovating and trying to be creative, and the downside of that can be not bringing people along and not communicating well. What's decided on a Monday, are we communicating that on a Tuesday? And being intentional about how we're communicating. Yeah. And so I think just being able to think through, hey, if how might this decision affect somebody else? As opposed to just making the decision itself, thinking through how might it affect somebody? What's the best way to communicate that? Is there a group of people that needs to hear about this before another group of people? And just being able to honor and respect one another in that way. I think, be authentic is one of our values as it relates to communication. I think just being honest, Jesus was always honest. And some of the things he said were really difficult, to say and for people to hear. Yeah. And yet he still said them. And so I think sometimes we don't do anybody any favors to just walk around, everything's great and trying to walk away from hard, difficult conversations. So I think we've grown in that way. I think you're one of the best I've seen at that, actually, Kurt. So Thanks. I really appreciate your leadership as it relates to being able to speak hard truths, but in love, so that the people that you're speaking to know that you care about them. I would say those are 2 of the main things about communication that I value. Yeah,
I think sometimes in a fast-paced organization, it's really easy for us to move so fast that when we get relationally dinked, we tend to villainize the other person. And so for us to slow down and believe the best in others, it's a hard thing to do, because honestly, our flesh wants to write a narrative that sometimes is not helpful. And so I think within that, I think that's probably one of the things that in most cultures, whether it's in an organization or if it's in a church atmosphere, or if it's on any sort of volunteer team, to believe the best in others, to believe that people aren't trying to screw up, that people intentionally aren't just trying to sabotage what's happening there. Sometimes there may be someone out of their brokenness may have some nefarious intentions, but that's most of the time not what's happening in a workplace or actually within a church environment. And I think I love this aspect where we talk about honor each other. And so Paul writes to the church, he says, honor one another above yourselves. And I think when we look at what does it look like for me to honor and to prefer and to give deference to others above myself, and what happens in that is I take the role of a servant. And so within any organization, as you start to go up in the organization, sometimes you can become more entitled. But actually, if we see, instead of becoming entitled, we see actually it's my job to wash more people's feet. Mm-hmm. That Jesus set an example for me that I never graduate from. And that is a wash basin and a towel to wash more people's feet and to love and to serve them well. And I think as we do that, as we honor one another above ourselves, man, it just creates a fantastic work environment where people don't feel threatened. You can still have difficult conversations. It's not like you're ignoring the elephant in the room, but you actually believe the best in one another because you believe that I'm for you. I'm not just for what you do for the organization. And I think that's the difference. And I really think that's what kind of that value speaking to. And then honestly, the being authentic thing is sometimes I think there was especially a tendency in the church in the 80s, 90s, and even part of the 2000s where people would ask you, how you doing? And people would be like, oh, I'm doing great. But on the inside, they're not doing great. Mm-hmm. And we would candy coat everything, and everything felt super kind of almost cheesy in a spiritual way. And I think it's important for us to, and it's not like you want to be a person who's always wearing your emotions on your sleeve, but that you would have relationships. You don't have to go deep with everyone, but you need to go deep with someone. Mm-hmm. And the truth of the matter is that if we don't go deep with someone, the truth of the matter is we'll hold those things inside of ourselves and it will eventually begin to eat away at our souls. And so, sharing our disappointments, sharing our joys, sharing the things that we're wrestling with. And that's why I love that Paul talks about in Hebrews 10:24, he says, let us not forsake the assembling of ourselves together as some are in the manner of doing, but let us consider how we can provoke one another to love and to good works. All of us need someone in our life that can help provoke us or to spur us on to love and to good works. And so I think that thing of being authentic, you need someone who you can be authentic with, but then someone to remind you like how God's gifted you, how God's called you, and what he wants to do in your life. The next one is internal core value is I will challenge myself and I will help others grow. Talk to me about that.
Well, I think it's somewhat self-explanatory, but I think, always growing, like you're talking about, always growing, always figuring out what's that next step. And, the thing that's interesting to me, and maybe it shouldn't be, but, God's economy is so often reversed from the world. And I think that, challenging yourself sometimes from a cultural perspective can be climbing the ladder. It can be getting to that next step. And oftentimes I feel like with the Lord, at least in my time with him, mm-hmm. It's humbling ourselves. That's what you were talking about, and figuring out how can I make myself less so that I can lift up others. When you're leading teams, how can I look for ways to give my team the credit or to encourage them on? I think being able to help other people help other people grow as certainly as leaders is a responsibility that we all have.
Sure. But
I think it starts with your own self. I mean, if there's not growth within yourself, then you're not gonna be able to help somebody else grow. And if you ever feel like you've reached that point where, hey, you don't need to grow anymore, then I think you really have to check, your heart and where you are.
Yeah. I think one of the things I love about this point is that I'm gonna challenge myself to grow. Here's the truth, is that oftentimes we don't grow without intentionality. So a marriage relationship doesn't grow without intentionality, without date nights, without communicating on the details of day-to-day things, without checking in with one another's hearts. And sometimes we don't check in with our own hearts. And sometimes, like in a marriage relationship, we don't know what our issues are that we need to work on unless that other person reflects it back to us. And so I think oftentimes people have seen when people give feedback, they see it actually as, something that you're against me. Or if someone challenges you on an issue or a behavior or a pattern of lifestyle, oftentimes we think, oh, why are you attacking me? And actually, if we can flip the script and actually realize when people bring something to us, it's almost as hard for them to communicate it to us as it is for us to hear it. And so, and when they actually communicate it, it's actually an act of love, not of hate. And so when we start to see feedback, and when people give us feedback or they challenge us on something, or if they tell us, hey, here's where you're meeting the mark, or here's where you're not meeting the mark, it's actually an act of love because they want us to be a better us. They want us to be the most effective us. They want us to be a better Christ follower. They're trying to encourage us in who we are. And sometimes it might not come out the best, but if we can begin to say, hey, I want to challenge myself. And what I need to realize is there's this word in scripture, the Greek word scotoma, or it's like these blind spots that we have. And the truth of the matter is it goes back to that verse where Jesus says, hey, before you go pick the speck out of your brother's eye, remove the log from your own eye. And the truth of the matter is he doesn't say, don't go and address the speck in your brother's eye. But what he is saying is address the log in your own eye first. And if we can challenge ourselves to grow, if I can ask others around me, hey, what are the things that you see in my leadership that are actually hindering my leadership? Man, that's a gift of feedback that the staff can give you, that your friends can give you, that your spouse can give you. Like, hey, what am I doing that's getting in the way? Mm-hmm. Like even asking your spouse that's one of the best ways, so you don't hear the feedback in another time when you're in an argument, because that's hard to hear that feedback.
Right.
But it's great when you can hear it and grow internally, when you hear it in an atmosphere of love and consideration, and you're actually asking for the feedback. And then when someone gives you that feedback, don't retort back. Don't say, well, you don't know, or you don't have perspective on. Just say, thank you for that gift. Mm-hmm. I appreciate that. And when you do that, man, it will flip your perspective on when people confront you, when people coach you, when people challenge you, and all of a sudden you'll start seeing it as a benefit to your heart versus actually something that is a detriment to your heart. And so,
yeah, that's good.
So we have another internal core value. It says, I'll make it happen by finding a solution no matter what the obstacle. What does that look like?
Well, I think it kind of goes hand in hand with one of our other core values that's talks about being all in, and it's figuring it out. It's taking whatever is given to you.
Yeah.
And being able to be part of the solution.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's, one of the things that I value for sure, and I know that our organization values, is being able to listen to people at all levels of the organization, that every idea is important, rather than just having a few people at the top that make all of the decisions. Mm-hmm. No, it's the opposite. We want to hear from everybody. Everybody has a voice that's valuable. Everybody mm-hmm. has ideas that are valuable. And so I love coming to meetings where teams have been challenged, with, hey, here's something we want to go after.
Yeah.
We want to hear ideas. What are your ideas? And then coming back with all of these amazing ideas. That creativity is not my strong suit. And so I think maybe that's why I just stand in such awe of so many of our employees who have such great creativity, and being able to stand back and go, okay, of these ideas, what do we want to try? Sure. That's one of the things I love about Pastor Alex, who he's constantly saying, let's try it. Let's try it. Let's try it and see what works. And so I think action is being a part of that. We're a team. Yeah. We try really hard not to silo our teams mm-hmm. and to keep things individualized, but to work together.
Yeah.
And humility is a big part of that.
Yeah.
Being willing to listen to somebody else's idea, even if you thought you had the best idea. And so when I think of action, I just think of people being all in, working together to try to get it done.
Yeah. I think a lot of times we can buy into the presupposition, the fact that the leader is the one who has the best ideas in the room. And actually the truth of the matter is the best ideas exist within the room. And oftentimes it's the leader's job to help draw it out of others.
Yeah, it's good.
And I think that's actually what really creates a collaborative atmosphere. And I think also a resiliency, like when we hit an obstacle, that we would quickly pivot and figure out the way around it. And I think that's one of the great things about our staff is the fact that they quickly pivot, they go after it, they're driven, they're motivated, because lost people matter. Mm-hmm. And everything exists on the fact that we want to love people well, and lost people matter, and we're going to go after them relentlessly, because that's what we see Jesus do. So I love that. And then the last one you kind of referred to is I'll be all in. What does that look like?
It just means being willing to say yes to whatever the need is, that nobody's above doing anything. Doesn't matter what your title is or what your position is. If, to help, to cross collaborate among teams, to help each other out, basically that you are willing to do whatever needs to be done.
Yep.
Again, it goes back to humility and servant heartedness, and just saying, hey, I'm going to help out.
Yeah. I think it's so easy in an organization. We think like, I want to pick and choose the things that I want to do. And rather than just saying, God, my life is yours. I'm surrendered to you. And so whatever you ask me to do, whether big or small, whether it's vacuuming carpet, whether it's doing announcements on stage, whether it's singing a song, whatever it is that God's asking us into, given our unique skill sets of what God's given us, man, we're just going to say yes to Jesus. We're going to say yes to how he sees fit to use us in this time. So, hey, Rachel, I want to pivot real quick on a new, or on a little idea here called Get to Know Rachel segment.
Okay.
And so I'm going to ask you a list of questions, and I want you to answer whatever your first inclination is when I ask you these. All right?
Okay. All right.
So you ready to do this?
I'm ready.
All right, here we go. And we're going to do this in 3, 2, 1. Sooners or Cowboys?
Oh, Sooners.
All right. Diet Coke or Diet Pepsi?
Diet Coke.
Eating out or eating at home?
Eating out.
12 Angry Men or A Few Good Men?
12 Angry Men.
Reese's or Sprouts?
Reese's.
Books or movies?
Books.
Jail or prison? Haha, caught you on that one. Cake or pie?
Pie.
Dogs or cats?
Dogs.
Pecans or pecans?
Pecans.
Awesome. Rib Crib or Oklahoma Joe's?
Oklahoma Joe's.
Xbox or PlayStation?
I don't care.
Country music or pop music?
Country music.
Awesome. Well done. Way to go, Rachel. Thanks so much for playing that little game. I think it's good for people to get to know you a little bit better. Hey, one last thing around some of the things we've been talking about as far as staff culture. This last year, our staff has been reading a book written by Patrick Lencioni called The Ideal Team Player. And in there, it's been one of the things that we've been forming about what an ideal team player looks like on our staff. Now, we have several things that we hire for that we believe are important, which would be chemistry, culture, competency, and character. And so those things are really important to us, but there's also a few other things, and we call them hungry, humble, and smart. And so can you tell us a little bit about what that looks like within our organization and why those 3 terms matter?
Yeah, so I think this book has been really good. You know, one of the things, no matter what I'm reading, one of the things that's so important to me is to always line it up with Scripture to figure out, hey, does this line up with the values that Scripture tells us? Whether it's a quote unquote Christian book or a Christian author or a secular author, I just think it's always important. And one of the things about this book that I have enjoyed is that as I have lined up those attributes, they're there. Mm-hmm. And I think, you know, for example, we'll start with humility, which I think probably of the 3, that's the one I would put as number 1.
Yep.
You know, it reminds me of, you know, Paul in Colossians, who says that we're supposed to clothe ourselves with compassion and kindness and humility and gentleness. And I just think it's so important whenever you're interviewing somebody to figure out, you know, what is their motivation?
Yeah.
Why are they here?
It's good.
Are they here because the Lord called them to be here? And honestly, I feel like when we talk about hunger, which is another one of those attributes, you know, what is the motivation of the hunger? Is it hunger for hunger's sake? Is it because I'm trying to achieve something? Am I trying to get to a certain level? Am I trying to prove that I'm better than everybody else, or that I'm, you know, have the best idea, as you were saying? Or does the hunger come from something that God has put inside of me? And you can't stop me.
Yeah.
You can't stop me because I want to be so obedient to what the Lord's called me to do that I am going to go after it with everything. That's that hunger that we're talking about, you know, because sometimes you'll interview somebody and it feels like, you know, maybe they're a very smart, competent person and very likable, but you feel like it's really more of just a job as opposed to like a passion and a calling. Yeah. And so when I think of hunger, I think of that. And then the other one, smart. What I think about when it comes to smart is really, you know, organizationally, how do you navigate things with people? To me, this is a relational piece. It's an EQ. It's a, you know, do I have awareness of how my decision or my communication is going to impact somebody else? Yeah. Am I always going back to the verse that you quoted? Am I thinking about somebody else more than myself? Yeah. And that would, and all of those attributes you find in the Bible, and Jesus was such a great example of those. And so I love that those are the 3 things that we're going after with our staff when we hire, but also internally, ways that we can grow. Yeah. And I think it's really important that you have all 3 of those things. Because if you only have one of them, if you have hungry, that person becomes a bulldozer. If they only have hunger, if they only have humility, they could be a pawn that people could push around the organization. And if they're smart, they might be seen as manipulative. And so the truth of the matter is all 3 have to be present. If you have 2 of the 3, it doesn't work. If you have 1 of the 3, it doesn't work. It really has to be all 3. And I love, like we were just talking about with relationally smart, because it's both situational and relational and self-awareness. It's all 3 of those: situational, relational, and self-awareness. And self-awareness is not just what am I feeling right now. That is one element of self-awareness, but true self-awareness is
how are you receiving me right now? And so it's seeking to understand, like, hey, in that last meeting, and I'll ask you this oftentimes, because Rachel and I are in a lot of meetings, and she used to be my direct report boss until recently. And so I'd ask, hey, how did you receive me in that meeting? And because I'm trying to grow in my self-awareness, because what I know about myself is I'm a verbal processor, and oftentimes I can dominate conversations unintentionally, just actually with the best of intentions, but sometimes the worst of application. And so within that, I think it's important for people to also understand that everything you do in an organization has a wake. And one of the things that we oftentimes talk about on our team is in every conversation, you're either building culture or you're busting culture. And so in every email, in every text message, in every meeting, you're either building culture or busting culture. And so you have this relational wake that follows behind you. And does that wake, like a wake that would follow behind a boat, does it cause damage to the shoreline? Well, if it goes too fast and it goes too hard, it will erode the shoreline. But if it goes at a proper pace, it doesn't cause any damage and actually can be a very good thing. It can be an enjoyable thing. And so I think that's always one of the things I'm always trying to think about with relationally smart. I think with humble, I love the idea of that this person is teachable, that they don't act like they know it all. And that even if I know something about a subject, I'm going to be open to people's input. And I'm just going to say, thank you for that feedback. And I think incorporating that in, and not in an insincere way, but in a way of like just saying, hey, that probably was difficult for that person to bring me that feedback, but thank you for that gift of feedback. And I think that as they start to put that in, and then also with humble, this is a person that always is putting the team first. They're thinking more about the team and celebrating them. They're slow to seek attention. They're quick to point out the contribution of others. Yesterday, we had this awesome event that we did for graduating seniors. And I love the person who leads that department. They were quick to point out the person that was below them within the organization to say, hey, look at what this person created. Look at how they innovated, and look at the win and the way we were able to love families and create these senior portraits with their families and friends for their graduation. Because in this time of COVID, it's been different. We've had to pivot and do things differently. And then lastly, I love the thing about hungry. Hungry people are always looking for more. They're looking for more things to do, more things to learn, more responsibilities to take on. These people have incredible work ethics. They're always looking to go above and beyond without being asked. They never have to be pushed to work harder by a manager. And they always are looking to do a great job within what they do. And so this person has a desire to also learn about self-learning, which ties into humility. And then they have a self-awareness to know they're not always the subject matter expert in every situation. So they have a relational, and they're smart emotionally. So I think those are such important keys to having a thriving team. If you can have those dynamic, those aspects within an individual, I think it creates a fantastic workplace. And so, Rachel, thanks so much for joining us today and for allowing us to do this podcast. Thank you so much for listening. And I want to just let you guys know we have some things that are coming up. We have some fresh content coming up. So a couple things before I get to that fresh content, I want to let you know that on May 31st, we have Ted Cunningham, who's coming to speak. He's going to be here live speaking to our staff, and then we're going to play it on the weekend of the 31st. And then the second thing is we are hoping and praying that we will be in phase 3 for June 7th, and we're hoping to relaunch all of our campuses and to have an awesome time. And for those of you who don't feel yet comfortable in this COVID season of coming back to services live at one of our campuses, we want to invite you to still join us online on Facebook, on YouTube, and on our webpage. And so a couple of things we also have coming up this week that we're still pushing out fresh content every week. So every Monday, we have our Beyond Battlecreek podcast. On Tuesdays, we have our women's event called The Table. On Tuesday nights, we have something called Tuesday Night Live for junior high and senior high school students. We have another thing that's called Distance Socialing, that's connecting with some of our volunteers over Zoom and checking in, just seeing how people are doing. On Thursday night, we have Kids Night. On Friday, we have Top 5 with our young adult ministries. And one of the things, Pastor Alex will be a special guest this week where they're going to talk about what are the top 5 pizza places in the area. And so
he's a foodie, so that one
he
should
is
be
a
good.
foodie. And Alex has strong opinions about food. And so last night, him and I were going back and forth over French fries and who has the best French fries. So it was awesome. And then on Saturday and Sunday, we have church online. And then on Sunday night, we have Better Together, which is kind of like our online community group. And so we want to let you guys know that. So thank you so much for joining us on the Beyond Battlecreek podcast. You guys, if you haven't I would encourage you to like, to share, and also to follow us on social media, on Facebook, Instagram, and on YouTube. Thanks so much for joining us, and have a great week.